We're celebrating the amazing career of Mike C. Check him out online. Road Dog, 1985 Road Dog on IG, and of course his book, Tales from the Gutter, and his tales of road managing LA Guns in their prime on those first records, Polygram. Um, and we need to pay tribute to the late, great Stephen Riley. You saw him with Wasp coming up. Here he is. He played with Keel, which was, I managed Steeler. Steeler became Keel. They had the right to rock, but he gets this offer. Hey, they're kicking out Tony Richards out of Wasp. He had some drug problems. They need a steady hand, and Riley was the man, and here he comes. He gets an offer after leaving Wasp to join LA Guns, and I know they had Nicky Beat before that and all that. Talk about over the years, just seeing what Riley brought, the consistency, the businessman that he was, um, and paying tribute to him. Obviously, there became two LA Guns at one point. He was running one, and Tracii left the band, decided he wanted to come back, and if he formed his own. Talk about that era and what you can say about the late great Stephen Riley.
Steve, we really connected very well. I mean, he's a Italian Irish guy from Boston. I'm an Italian guy from New York. We just really understood each other. Incredible drummer. I mean, I just watching him on the side of the stage every night, just bashing away. The guy was incredible,
He was
solid
an
drummer.
athlete.
He's an athlete. I mean, again, when Nicky Beat was in LA Guns, they were more of like a punk rock kind of a band. Nicky Beat was in the band called the Weirdos.
Yeah.
He was a punk rock guy. And Tracii uh, ran into Steve. Steve was at SIR rehearsing by himself, just keeping his chops up playing the drums.
Yeah.
He ran into Tracii, and Tracii wanted he wanted a real live double bass playing rock star drummer. So he got Steve in the band and threw out Nicky. That's Tracii. I mean, Tracii, no loyalty, really. That's
I mean, what's there been over 100 members in LA Guns today?
The whole LA Gun saga is insane. The whole thing, but that band formed in '84. And Axl Rose was in the first incarnation and
Yeah.
back and forth, and it was just it was very incestuous, that scene at the time.
Sure.
By the time Riley got in, Riley was professional, had been in multiple bands with
Oh
record
yeah,
deals.
the Bees and Keel and Wasp. He was a
He
veteran.
he was a veteran. He handled a lot of the business for the band, dealt with things that no one else wanted to deal with. Um,
He was
and
married. I mean, he was stable.
he was married. Yep, stable guy. And it was tough for him to come out of Wasp. I mean, Wasp wasn't super huge, but they were managed by the same manager as Iron Maiden, Rod
Yeah, they had
Small,
Rod Smallwood in their court.
and they treated Wasp like rock stars because that's what how Blackie wanted to be treated. So Wasp stayed at good hotels, and they were like rock stars in the way they were treated, whether they had sales to back that up or not. So Riley came into LA Guns, and their manager at the time, LA Guns, and their booking agent and everything was very indie, very punk rock in its approach. Everybody else on Polygram had big management. Who are Q Prime or
Scorpions and yeah, all
yeah,
the big.
big management. LA Guns had this guy who supported them for a year, paid their bills, got them a record deal. But when it got time to dealing with the business, he was kind of in over his head.
He
So,
didn't
but
have the connections to get the big tours.
he didn't really have the connections. They had a small booking agent, risky business. Everyone else was with ICM or some big agency.
William
So
Morris.
LA Guns was very punk rock in its approach in that first year. So by the time they get to Cocked and Loaded, the second album, they fired their manager, they fired their business manager, they fired their booking agent. They got all big time rock and roll management and agencies and all that. And
Alan Kovac.
yes, they wanted to be bigger. And once that happened, that was like the beginning of the end, because then it wasn't LA Guns anymore. They're writing with people, they're doing I mean, you know, they had songs on that second album that the background vocals were like angel choirs, and live you hear this angel choir and there's no one standing at the microphone. It's like, you know, so it was just they bit off more than they could chew. But Riley was a big part of the business and in keeping that band moving forward, knowing what to ask of the label, knowing what to ask of the management. I love Steve Riley. We spent a lot of time together, and you know, he was a big part of that success of that band. You know, yeah, but all the different incarnations and two versions and this guy's version, and it was all so petty. And all what's
Well,
funny is
Tracii left. He's like forming Killing Machine, wanted to be thrash, and then jumps into Brides of Destruction with Nikki Sixx. It was like a train wreck, you know. And then all of a sudden he's like, "All right, I want my band back," and they're like, "What band? This is our band now. You just can't
well,
walk back in after abandoning us 8 years ago."
and that's exactly what happened. He just, I'm back. You know, this is, you know, and then he started a second version. But there was all these accusations of things that Steve did and money he stole and all this stuff. It was all bullshit because
Right.
later on, when it all came out, what happened to the royalties and where it was all down to the wrong address. I mean, that's really what it came down to.
Yeah.
So it was Steve was vindicated, not publicly, but I know the backstory. Tracii was just very unloyal and just, you know, well, I tell a story in my book in the beginning of LA Guns. Nikki Beat tells the story that they were about to play the Troubadour and Jack Douglas was coming down and all this stuff. Meanwhile, Tracii is in New York making a record with this Penthouse pet, Cheryl Rickson, and Tracy's playing on her record. And Nikki Beat was calling him, well, when are you coming back? Like, we have this gig. All these labels are coming. This is like 80, I want to say like 85.
Right.
And Tracy's like, oh, yeah, I'll be back Tuesday. And well, what happened was Tracii says to Nikki, well, you know what? I think I'm going to stay in New York and play with Cheryl. This is really working out for me. You guys just keep the name and you guys just go on without me. And this is in 85. Wow. So Tracii has always done this. He always wanted to be a rock star. To me, he's a talented guy, but he suffered from being in the shadow of Axl and Slash and Guns N' Roses. On that first tour, every interviewer that interviewed Tracii Guns wanted to talk about Guns N' Roses. So it was tough on him. I understand that, but you know, what can I say? I mean, you know, he was just not, you know, I couldn't depend on Tracii, really. You know, I could depend on Steve. I could depend on Kelly Nichols. You know,
Yeah.
I couldn't.
Talk about Kelly, because you go way back. You played in a band in New York with Kelly. Kelly was a survivor, got out of the LA Guns, circus, and then came back for Steven. Steve Riley's LA Guns had Kelly Nichols, the two, veterans of the band. They had two other guys. They finally laid it to rest. But talk about Kelly, because he came out of Faster Pussycat. He told me about his motorcycle accident and all that. What can you say about Kelly?
Well, I mean, Kelly, I go way back with Kelly. One of my good friends at the time, he's still my friend, Bruno Ravel, who went on to form Danger Danger.
Yep.
Him and the drummer, Steve West, they had a cover band in the early 80s, and they played all new wave songs in these bars. Kelly Nichols got the job at some point as the roadie for this cover band. And that's how I met Kelly. Okay. And we immediately clicked and became really friendly. And then I started a band that was just like, not really a band, but like a project. Right. He was in that for a minute. Then he left. Then he got out to LA. He joined Faster Pussycat, got in a motorcycle accident. And then Tracii got him into LA Guns. Kelly is the reason I became the road manager for LA Guns. Okay. I was working for Relativity Records in '87. I was going out to LA like once every 4 or 5 weeks and for business. And I would connect with Kelly, and LA Guns were recording their record, and I met everybody else. And that's how I got involved with those guys, through Kelly. But yeah, after LA Guns broke up, well, what happened was with this recent Riley's LA Guns thing, they were still calling it LA Guns because it hadn't been cleared in court who owned the name, who had rights to the name. But what happened was there were a bunch of tour dates set up for Riley's LA Guns, and they were going to make a record, and then COVID hit, and all of that got squashed, which meant Riley's LA Guns kind of like were pretty much done because but if COVID hadn't hit, they had all these shows set up. Now, would they have had to change the name from LA Guns to Riley's LA Guns? Probably, but COVID kind of derailed that. And then it just, Kelly's like, I mean, I don't talk to him all the time, but he posted something recently about the band's officially broken up, Riley's LA Guns, and he doesn't want to he doesn't want to go on and be like some of these fat rock stars looking like Santa Claus on stage. Like, so he's like accepted that he is who he is at this age, and he doesn't want to, sure, he might jam or play for fun once in a while, but he's not going to try to make a career anymore out of a musician. But yeah, I mean, Kelly was, Kelly, a lot of fun, very funny guy. He always got in the magazines, the hunk of the month kind of thing. And he looks the part, man. Kelly was always the coolest looking dude. He always had good hair, and he was a rock star, even when he was a roadie. I mean, I kind of felt that and knew that, you feel that from people, even if they're not on stage, and you can feel this guy's got it. He has that energy of the magnetism that people want to be around him or whatever. So yeah, Kelly was, got into LA Guns. The first gig I ever saw LA Guns do, he was on crutches. He just stood there. He couldn't move because of his leg. And that leg bothered him through that whole first tour. He had multiple operations, and, he was in bad shape with that leg.
Oh, wow. And what about Phil Lewis? Of course, we knew Phil was in the band Girl, 79, 80 out of England. They had a guitarist named Phil Collin, comes in, saves the day for, Def Leppard, and becomes Pyromania. They are the biggest band in the world at that point. But Phil gets a call. They're looking for a singer. They kick Paul Black out. What kind of character is Phil behind the scenes? What can you say about him?
I mean, Phil is like, I always call him like a Lord Byron kind of a guy. He's well read, he's smart, he's older than all the other guys. I don't know who was older, him or Steve Riley. They were probably about the same age. Okay. But Phil was, he was the you never knew with Phil. He was one of those candles in the hotel room and scarves on the lamps, and he wasn't a big druggie or anything like that, but he might, all of a sudden do some mescaline or some acid, and he disappear for a day and a half. I mean, that's just Phil. He's I think he grew up. I don't know if he was a roadie or he worked for Pink Floyd when he was a teenager. Like Phil is much more worldly than all of those guys. Right. Dated Britt Eklund.
And Girl was on Jet Records, so we're talking Don Arden, Sharon Osbourne's dad, the infamous Break Your Legs manager, and all that.
Yeah, Phil is he dated Britt Eklund. So if no one knows who that is, just look her up. I mean,
Rod Stewart, Phil, Slim Jim
Rod Stewart before Phil. So Phil has always been much more worldly and much more, plus he, in America at that time, he had the British accent. So, girls would just melt, I mean, it just what it was. But he was an okay guy, Phil. I mean, I saved him a couple times and getting arrested. He was a big, I don't know if he still is, but he used to be a kleptomaniac. He was always stealing stuff from truck stops and pawn shops. And he tried to steal a gun one time, and he almost went to prison. Wow. I did my best save your ass move that time to get him out of that. But well, yeah,
it's amazing to see him still out there, but it's kind of crazy with his age and pedigree. They're still playing clubs. They just shot their first video off the new album at the Sugar Shack out in Tarzana. The place holds like 50 people. I mean, holy shit! It's got to be crazy. Talking about being
Well,
in the shadows of Guns N' Roses, still playing stadiums at this point.
yeah, that's how they pay the bills. I mean, it's either that or get a job. So I think they, again, and I meant to say this earlier, you were talking about Pretty Boy Floyd. As these bands go on and get older and drop off the scene, even the crappiest nothing bands people will care about.
Yeah,
Like,
they're nostalgic. They're like, hey, I remember that video on MTV, and
whoever, South Gang. I mean, I'm not nothing
yeah,
against any of these bands, but they weren't big. So when Guns N' Roses and LA Guns and Skid Row and all these bands are not around anymore, the people will care about South
right.
Gang.
Oratora and all these
Or
bands. They end
yeah,
up on the
Days
Monsters of Rock
Tour.
cruise or bottom
Exactly.
bill because people remember the ad in Rip magazine.
So it won't be long until LA Guns are one of the top ones left. You know what I mean?
The elder
So
statesman.
elder statesmen, but they're still able to go out and get guarantees at places. And I know they make money or they wouldn't be doing it. I mean, they're not doing it
Yeah.
just for fun. They're doing it because they pay the bills. So, yeah, I mean, I got nothing against those guys. I mean, God bless. I mean, it is still Tracii and Phil. So it's the main two guys, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
Um,
But I'm sure it's no tour bus. I'm sure it's a van and cheap hotels at this point.
Yeah, it's rough. I know it's not easy to tour like that, and it's easy when you got buses and catering and per diems and
Yeah. You got a
hotels.
bathroom and kitchen and shower right there.
You have to really either love it or I got no other choice. I got to do this, and that's what LA Guns is doing. That's how they pay the bills. Now, Phil's got to be 70 years old,
At least.
at least. So,
At least.
I guess as long as they can do it, they're going to do it. It's either that or I don't know.
But his old guitarist in Def Leppard is playing stadiums, is on private jets and multiple tour buses. So, not to compare the two, but and Phil is fit as a fiddle, man. The guy's got a 12 pack. He's deep into his 60s, and he rips that shirt off by the end of the first song, and the girls still go crazy.
Yeah, he never had a problem with body image. He never got heavy or he always knew how to take care of himself. He taking herbal supplements when nobody ever. What do
Yeah,
you do?
he's lifting weights and juicing backstage.
Yeah, he's always taken care of himself in that respect. Um, but God bless. I mean, they're still doing it. I never signed up to be a road manager. I
Right.
got the road manager gig just because it just happened.
Sure.
Um, and I'm able to reflect back on that and have a lot of accuracy and clear vision of it because I didn't do it for my whole life.
Yeah,
If
you
you
didn't go from one tour to another to another to another.
Right. You do that for 20 years, you're not going to remember anything. It's all one big blur. Whereas I did it for 10 months, really solid. And I wrote a lot of stuff down. So I'm able to look at it differently because it wasn't my lifelong career. Um, so I have great memories of those times and it was a lot of fun. Um, you know, and it was drama too, but that's life. You
Well,
take the good and the bad.
we can't thank you enough. It is our special guest, Mike C. Go get his book, his Tales from the Gutter. Great stories, Mike. It's been a real pleasure. Can't wait to talk to you again. You got an amazing Instagram at 1985 Road Dog. Uh, Best to you and your family out there in the desert. We love New Mexico, Colorado, all that scene out there. It is God's country, and we can't wait to talk to you again. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.